Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
I'm Jason Mefford, and welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast.
Wow, that was so different.
It was different, wasn't it?
It was different. I'm Kathy Groover. I'm also a co-host here.
We just like to keep people on their toes when we're, and because we record these early in the morning.
So basically what we need to know is that's Jason, and I'm Kathy, and this is the Fire and Earth
here
podcast.
we are.
And
yes,
here we are.
And here we are.
So that's all you need to know to this point. Now, moving forward, what you need to know. So we're going to talk today about an adventure, about a journey that a lot of people around the country/world are taking. And I had my second experience with yesterday, which is ketamine. Now, ketamine was originally a method of anesthesia. It is a party drug. I don't recommend it, but it is legal for things like PTSD and depression, and there's ketamine clinics that are popping up everywhere. And being that I have just finished up my psychedelic training, I wanted to experience this and see what it was like so that I can help others prep and integrate their experiences. So yesterday I had number 2. It was very different than number 1, which everyone said it would be, but I didn't know to what extent. So it was just an interesting journey. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about that, about the uses of ketamine, about how to safely, identify a clinic, go to a clinic, and make sure you do good prep and integration, because that's really the key to working with any of these psychedelics or sacred medicines. So there's today.
Yeah, because I think it's, like you said, number 1 was different than number 2. Right. And I know we've talked about this before, too, that I think a lot of times, the prep and understanding kind of what people are getting into is so important, because I think a lot of times people go in with certain expectations, but, whether it's, sacred plant medicine or, other synthetic things, you don't choose, right? You get the journey that you need, not the journey that you want.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are not prepared for that.
Right.
So yeah, let's talk about that, because again, like you said, I know that a lot of people are dipping their toe into it, and a lot of them, without much information other than, hey, this is the cool thing to do, let's go do it.
Yeah.
And then they end up getting really distorted. Like I think you mentioned before offline, right? Somebody even with ketamine, because that's I mean, you know more than I do, but I think it's considered more of a safer one to take as well. But when not done correctly, it can lead to some things that you don't want.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, Matthew Perry, died from ketamine. He was not doing it in a clinic. He made some really poor choices, unfortunately. He was on a home program, and I don't think they figured out at this point if this was something that had been prescribed to him or if he got on the black market someplace. Had alcohol, had ketamine, had a heart condition, and went in a hot tub.
Not a smart idea.
Not a smart idea. So, any of these, not any of them, mushrooms are safe, LSD is safe, but things that have a chemical compound to them, it's a big party drug now. And so another place where, it's about the set and the setting, and you might have a great experience and it might be a nightmare for you. Ketamine is very quick. So it's a 4 to 6 minute onset, and it lasts 45 minutes to an hour. So it's not like a 12-hour LSD trip where 6 hours in, you're like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. I mean, it's very fast. In the clinical setting, they either do intravenous or intramuscular. There's different methods for what you're there for. So people with deep trauma, depression, pain syndromes, PTSD, things like that, they often do intravenous with other things in it, with like vitamin C and things like that. Mine was intramuscular. They did 80 the first time and they did 90 the second time, because they up it a little bit each time, just because your subconscious kind of is like, oh, I've already been here. And so they give you a little boost each time. It felt, to me, the second one felt quicker, but it was actually longer. I felt a little more me in the second one. With the first one, I had complete ego dissolution, which was fascinating because I knew there was a Kathy, but I didn't know what a Kathy was. It's like when someone says a word to you and you're like, oh God, I saw that movie. What is that? That's kind of what I felt like. I was like, I knew there was a Kathy, but it didn't matter. I knew that I was on Milpas Street, except I didn't know what a Milpas was. And I had this sort of bird's eye view of this line with a circle at the end, because there's a traffic circle at the end of Milpas. And I kind of like understood the concept of all those things, but it didn't have any meaning to it. It didn't have any weight to it. And a lot of people, that's the experience they want with psychedelics, is they want that ego dissolution. They want to not be tied to things, not be controlled by their thoughts, not be, sucked into those psychodramas, and that sort of, repetitive thinking that can really keep us stuck. So I think that's a big search for people who head to some of these psychedelics. I have a client who I helped with prep and integration for, and his depression went from, I'm considering going to a state where I can elect medically assisted suicide, to the happiest go luckiest person I've ever seen. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this is, I can help people prep and integrate anything. And if I've had the experience, it's easier for me. I had one woman call me and say, I'm trying to decide between this and ketamine. What do you think? And I said, well, tell me what you're looking for. Here are my experiences. You pick, So having that sort of institutional knowledge, if you will, has been really helpful when people ask me about these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's I don't know much about it because, again, that's your space, not my space, right? But it's interesting because I think when we were talking beforehand too, I mean, some of the things that you experienced, like you said, the first one was kind of an ego dissolution. So what was the second one more like?
The second one was, you don't need to do that again because you did it and you're still there. So it didn't need to dissolve again. It just sort of put me back in that place where I still didn't understand, like, so when I wake up from this, or is this the reality and out here is the trip? There's this sort of imbalance of realities, which could be very disturbing if you're not ready for that, not, waking up and not knowing, okay, am I on Milpas, or is that the trip and this is the reality of being in this space? There's this feeling for me, there's this sort of physical distortion. I'm sure I'm upside down. I am sure my legs are up here and my head is down there, and I'm like slanted, and I'm like, you're laying flat. I know what position I went in. They didn't move me, but there's just this physical distortion, and your hands feel really teeny. So like if you go to do this, it feels like you have these teeny little hands. And there was a part of me that was like, wow, that's going to make massage really hard. I hope my hands get back to normal, because it's a sedative, right? So there's this physical distortion. During the first one, your mouth gets kind of cottony, at least for me. So I kind of wanted to do that, like to get the spit moving, except I couldn't. And it felt like I was eating my own face. And I had this thought of, I feel like I'm eating my own face. Now, there's somebody watching me. They're not going to let me eat my own face. They would get terrible reviews if they let people eat their own face. And I actually like, 4 stars till I ate my own face. And, so it's like you have those kind of, I mean, it's trippy. That's why they say it's trippy. I mean, that's where it comes from. And it sucks because sometimes that's the only word for it is, that was trippy. Right, but what does that mean? I don't know, One of the things, so I had a client who was dealing with, she had a history of sexual trauma and a lot of PTSD. And of course, as a coach, that's out of my scope. So we would deal with her sort of life living stuff. And she ended up going to a local ketamine clinic. And my understanding, she was not in California, she was in a different state. But my understanding was they would put her in the room, they would hook her up to an IV, she'd trip balls for an hour, and then they'd send her home. And they did not integrate her experience. They did not pair her with someone to help her do that. And it fucked her up. I believe it triggered more psychosis for her. And I don't know if ketamine was just not the right choice for her, but it really screwed her up. And that's unfortunate because, there's a shadow side to everything, right? But like any medicine, whether a psychedelic or a pharmaceutical or an herb, or, you have to know what you're going into and you have to prepare and integrate that. And one of the things that I love about the clinic here in Santa Barbara with Dr. Remy is they assign you a coach. They're like, here's your coach. And they sit with you. I mean, I sat with her yesterday for a half an hour, setting intentions, talking about what's been going on. I don't know what order these are going to come out in, but, the heading back to Pittsburgh and the grief thing, she and I talked at length about that. And one of the intentions I set heading into this was, let's deal with any grief that I'm carrying that is no longer serving me. If there's any big emotions that need to be released, let's do it. And at one point, to me, it feels like I'm dropping down a canyon of colors and sounds. You can see the walls are very flat, but they're sort of colorful. And as I was dropping down that canyon, and it doesn't scare you. It's not a free fall, like, kind of thing. It's just you're floating down this canyon. I could feel things just being taken from me.
Hmm.
And then I got to the bottom, and it was like energy, like almost microwaves were like heating me up. And so I was like, just accept that. And I remember opening my hands as much as I could with them being so small. And just sort of I'm like, okay, I'll take whatever you're giving me, whether it was I got a lot of downloads the first time, downloads or information or healing or cosmic light, I don't know what it was, but I just accepted that. And then afterwards, the first time I was really out of it. I must have laid there for an hour, just like dozing in and out. It was like trying to come up from surgery, which makes sense, because sedative. This time I was more verbal, and she asked me some really pivotal questions. She's like, is there anything words you want to write down? Anything you want to take from this experience into the outside world? Anything that you need to do over the next couple of weeks, let me know when you want to do your integration session. She touched my hand and said, I'm going to go let you rest. We'll be back in 10 minutes to check on you. So it's a space that's very caring, very safe. And that integration is so, so important. And this is one of the reasons I was excited to kind of tell you about it today, because this only happened yesterday, and I haven't even begun to figure out what all happened. I have no clue what happened to that hour. Things that I'm like, oh, I should remember that. Of course I don't. So yeah, it was much more cerebral, even though I don't remember any of it. It seemed more brainy than symbolic somehow. I don't know. It's always fascinating.
Well, that's why I think it's interesting, because I think there's a couple areas that I'm interested in asking you more questions about. But I know, we talk about, well, we need to integrate. We need to integrate. You need to integrate everything. But, somebody reminded me yesterday, it's like, everybody says that, but nobody tells you what integration actually is. Right. So, when you think about some of those things, so I know you said, your client wasn't really integrated. She was just kind of let go.
Yep.
Nothing was done. So what does integration actually look like? Or because I know it's different for different people at different times and in different ways, but what are kind of some ways that one integrates these kinds of experiences?
Yeah. So let's say you do an immersive course in French, and you learn all the words, and you learn all the slang, and you learn all the phrasing, and then you never speak to anyone in French.
Mm-hmm.
You learned the thing and you had the experience, but you didn't actually use it. You didn't integrate into your life anything you learned. That just popped into my head. But to me, that's sort of what integration is. Like, I had this experience. It was this hour of whatever the hell it was. Okay, now what do I do with that? Do I take that presence and that ego dissolution that I had in that space? Do I take that neuroplasticity that I'm going to have for 2 to 3 weeks? What do I want to do with that? And that was one of my journal questions, is what do I want to do with this neuroplasticity now?
Mm-hmm.
That my brain is open and I can connect different things. And, do I want to heal that grief surrounding my dad in the house? Is there anything from my past relationships, romantic or friendship, that I want to settle in and heal, if there was any of that left? My intention going in was, if there's anything that you need to tell me, if there's anything cosmically that I need to know, if there's any healing that I need to accept, let's do that. So I think integration is taking what was in that limited experience, time-wise, and then carrying it out into the outside world. So, you go through this program and you learn French, but you never speak to anyone in French. You didn't integrate that course. So that to me is sort of the best analogy for it.
Well, and you kind of explained there too, like journaling, right? You're journaling afterwards. Journaling is an integration technique, right?
Huge.
No different than like you learn French and then you decide to start practicing by writing it out, right? That's a way of integrating the French that you've learned.
Yep.
Speaking about it, right? That's why having a coach afterwards, or having, somebody to kind of talk through some of these things, because sometimes And this is another thing where it's like you kind of remember, but you don't, and you're kind of grasping for it, right? That ends up happening a lot of times with these kind of journeys, but also
Yep.
happens in everyday life, in dreams.
Sure.
Often we wake up in the morning and it's like, oh man, I had this dream, and then it slowly just kind of like fades away
Mhm.
unless we integrate it by doing things like writing down a word, or
Yep.
taking a voice memo on her phone about,
Yep.
man, I just had this dream, this da 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 da, right? And then it's kind of sitting down and processing it and thinking about, okay, what does this mean? Because a lot of times, in journeys or dreams, we're given, even during the day, sometimes when you get downloads,
Yeah,
you
totally.
just get a word, or you get an image of something, or you get, a 2 or 3 word phrase, and it's
Yep.
like, okay, what does that mean? Right? That we've got to then kind of integrate and reflect on it,
Hmm.
journal about it, talk to somebody about it, right? In a way so that we can start to kind of pull in or figure out, what does that
Hmm.
actually mean for me at this
Yep.
time? Because often too, it can be a little confusing because the terms or phrases have so many different meanings
Right.
based on the context, and they're going to mean something to you now, but a week from now it can mean something else.
Yeah, and it's so imagery driven and so like esoteric. I mean, there aren't words for it a lot, which is why people go, it was just trippy, because I don't know that I would be able to describe the feelings and the experience I had yesterday. And the word, and I don't know if you said the word while you were just talking, or just, but decoding what happened is, you know, key to that, and as well as journaling. And so one of my instructors, actually she was my pod leader named Naz. She's amazing. She said we get so right brain, we get so I'm going to explain my trip. She said that's what happens when you journal. She said, so maybe you don't journal, maybe you pick up pens and paper and you just start drawing something. She would do a journey map where she would do the first thing she remembered, she'd do an image of it, and then she would do the next thing she remembered, and she would kind of start to put these lines together. And that would help her kind of map her journey from the other side of our brain, because the rational mind is not the one having this experience. But yet we come out of it and our rational mind goes, what's happened? Let me see. You
But
know,
we need to analyze it, when effectively we need to feel it instead of
right.
just analyzing it.
And even my coach said that yesterday. So I kept going, huh, interesting. Huh. I mean, like it was like this head scratcher, kind of like, huh. And she goes, so I want you to think about it. I don't want you to overanalyze it. Don't overthink it. Like, try to get back what you can, but don't overthink it, is what she kept telling me. Because I do that. I think most of us are overthinkers, maybe not everybody, but
No,
so yeah, not overthinking is,
and I guess too, kind of having the patience, right, for when you receive it.
yep.
Because I know there's been some times where, again, a dream that I had, it was actually at this house that I'm in right now, but it happened like 5 years ago. I saw myself doing some yard work in front of the house, and I woke up and I'm like, that's really weird. I have no idea where that place is. Why was I dreaming about that? 5 years later,
Right. Here we are.
I'm out in the yard doing some work, and all of a sudden the image from that dream popped back in. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense now. Now I understand, right? And so I think a lot of times too with the integration, it's like not trying to force it, right? We
Yeah.
we 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 do the work, but we don't overanalyze it, and we don't try to set a timeline for when we're going to understand it. We'll understand it when we understand it.
Yeah. And I mean, like with my Bufo journey, um, most of that didn't come to me until a couple days after, because I whited out. I didn't know what happened until I meditated the next day, and it all came flooding back. And then I went and sat in the park and had a great talk with a rock, a bird, something else I talked to. I don't remember. I wrote it down. And here's the other thing, write it down, because now I don't remember what that integration was, right? So before I had my experience yesterday, I opened my old journals and I read my last couple journeys of, okay, what do I want to add on to? It's, to me, for me, no matter which substance, which medicine it's been, there's been this here to here to here to here to, there's been a clear sort of building upon what came before sort of thing.
Mhm.
Um, It's like improv. It's like you start the story and then I continue the story and then the next person and it goes around the circle. That's how I feel these have been for me. I don't think it's that way for everybody. I've talked to so many people, including classmates, that they don't have that sort of continuum through line through their experiences. It's also individual, and this is why it's tough, right? So it's like you've met one journey, you've met one journey. You haven't met them all. But if you want to work with this medicine, find a clinic that's reputable, find someone that has, the gentleman that runs this is an ER doc, he's an osteopath. They have all the medical, stuff in place in case something would go awry, which it's probably not going to, but people are individual.
Yeah.
Have a good coach to help you with the prep of this and the integration. What are your intentions going in? Not that they're 100% going to be met, because again, you get the trip you need, not necessarily the trip you want. And sometimes it's scary, and sometimes it brings the trauma back to the surface, and you've got to swim through it. There was an article in the Independent, which is our little weekly newspaper here, and Eric and I were out to breakfast, and I said, "Oh God, I should probably read that," because the cover story was this woman's ketamine experience, and I didn't pick it up. Well, I should have read it, because apparently she had a horrible experience and went on this rant about how terrifying it was and how traumatic it was. And it's like, oh, I don't have that deep trauma. I don't have PTSD. I was never sexually assaulted. I didn't go to it to move past that sort of thing. I have a very much lighter experience compared to someone that's going in with, years of PTSD and sexual trauma and held at gunpoint and, that sort of thing. So just know that you're going to have a very different experience every time and than other people do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and whether things come up because of a trip or they come up in the course of life, it's the same thing.
Totally.
Right. And because I know, on the last episode we've recorded, it's the same thing about going home. It's like you weren't on a trip per se, but those things came up that have to be integrated. Right. And so it's just the medicines obviously kind of bring up some of the shadows that we weren't necessarily thinking about, or we weren't in a local environment to have those things come up.
Yep.
But regardless of what they are, whether it comes from, a trip, or if it comes from life, we've got to yeah, a trip or a real trip, right? We've got to integrate those things. And I think that's what's so important too, that so many people out there are missing. And again, it was kind of brought to my attention. It's like people just really aren't talking about that. They're as much as what people need. And so a lot of people kind of go part way, and then they get stuck because they're not able to release or integrate or get it, and it gets stuck somewhere. And so, that's why it's great that you're offering that service, helping people do that too, because it's so important to do that. And I think, as you were talking too about how your journeys have kind of gone like in a logical sequence, I think the fact that you spend a lot of time really beforehand in prep and, setting your intention for what you want, I think that's probably why you're being given the trips that you're given in the order that you're given too, because you're approaching it not just from a curiosity, hey, I want to see what it's like, but you're actually, preparing and have an intention for why you're going through the experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a huge difference too. I think the more people are prepared, right, the better of an experience it's going to be for them, as far as getting what they really need and understanding why they're getting it, and then integrating it afterwards makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And part of it truly was curiosity. I've realized, just especially in thinking back to, going to my dad's house, my mother used to call me a neb shit. In Pittsburgh, the word nebby means nosy, and neb shit is someone that can't stay out of things they're not supposed to be in. If it was closed, I wanted to open. If they said, don't go in there, I'm like, well, I guess I'm going in there. It's like, don't tell me not to look, because I'm digging through that closet. That's just, and, with all the learning, and, I have like 7 tabs open on my computer of things that I want to learn or read about. That's just me. So part of this is, I wonder what's going to happen. Like, I want to see what this is like, especially compared to other medicines. right? It's very different. Psilocybin is very different than LSD, is very different than ketamine, is very different than bufo, is very different than, all these other things that people are using. And I think you have to go into that knowing that, if you're at a party and somebody says, hey, do you want some ketamine? You better know what that's going to do to you, and feel confident that you're in a place, a set and setting where you're physically safe, but also emotionally, spiritually safe. Because if that dredges up some horrible childhood experience of trauma, and you're at a party with a bunch of people that are stoned off their ass, that is not where you want to have that experience. And
No, and
yeah, I think that's the danger of, people just doing this, getting into a K-hole. And it's like, that's fun if you're in the right set and setting and you're in the right mindset to do that. And I think, as these medicines become more legal for therapy, I think that's also going to open up more mainstream recreational use. And on one hand, I'm like, okay. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh, just really be careful. It's like I said, like everyone's mom, be careful what you're doing, because you don't know what's in it or where it came from. It's
yeah, and you don't. I mean, because there's obviously some physical things, because a lot of the street drugs are laced with other stuff. You don't know what's in them.
yeah.
But I think too, for people to realize it's okay, right? If everybody else is doing it and you don't feel like you're ready, or now is not the time to do it, it's okay to say no. Right? I mean, again, it's like if somebody walks up to you at a party and is like, here's some ketamine, take it, or here's some LSD. It's like, whoa, now, just a minute. I wasn't really prepared for this. I haven't really thought about, let me, yeah, I want to do it maybe, but I need to prep myself first, right? It's okay to say no if you don't feel like you're ready. If it feels like it's not for you, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's other ways of getting to these states too, that if that's not your thing, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And not to give into the peer pressure, not to be Nancy Reagan, sort of thing of don't do drugs kind of thing.
Just say no.
Just say no. But if you're not ready for it, or if you don't feel like you want to do it, it's okay.
Well, and also let's look at the physical safety aspect of this, right? So LSD typically lasts 8 to 12 hours. Where are you? How are you getting home? Are you prepared to be in an environment with these people who maybe are all tripping for 8 to 12 hours? What if you need something? With mushrooms, it often causes nausea. People often shit themselves. People, it's like that's going to last, depending on how much you take, 4 to 6 hours. MDMA often puts people in a place where they love everybody and it's so touchy-feely. Are you in an environment with safe people? Are they going to take advantage of that? Are you going to wake up in bed with 6 people that you don't know, that you didn't want to do that, but that was influenced by the substance? Is there somebody there sitting with you who's not on this medicine, who's going to make sure you're all safe? And that's the thing that worries me most about this. I mean, when I take ketamine, I cannot move my body. I can't move my body. I'm frozen there. I could imagine doing that at a party, and after that hour, waking up next to someone that I don't know who just horribly took advantage of me because I couldn't physically move. So you have to, and again, not to take it to the negative thing, but are you in a place that's safe? I had a client share with me the other day that she dropped acid and then went to high school. I'm like, oh no. And she was having open eye visuals. This was a 12-hour experience for her. So she's trying to navigate talking to people and classes and teachers and books and lockers with things morphing into dragons around her. And I'm like, okay, I've never had open eye visuals. But I can't imagine trying to navigate real life in that situation. And quote, no one knew she was tripping, but it's like, to look at her, you might have figured it out. But was that a safe place for her to be? It's like you hear people thinking they can fly and jumping out of a 12-story window, which has happened, not as much as they say, because also if you think you can, even if you can fly, why would you not start 2 feet off the ground and not 30? There's still a part of your brain that's like, let me start slow and see if this actually works. So just being around people who are really going to keep you safe, whether it's a clinical setting or whether it's a party, I think that's the most important part of this, and that goes into the setting, and the prep.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So now that I scared the shit out of everyone.
Well, it's not to scare people, but I think it's just like a public service announcement because I think, like you said, I mean, part of me is like you are too, of, you know, the easy access and the way that some people might try to take advantage of other people because of this,
Yeah.
you know, just to be, you know, prepared and
Yeah.
realize, you know, what you really are getting yourself into, and just doing it the right way.
Yeah.
You know, so that you're safe, so other people around you are safe, so you've got a support network. You know, having a sitter is an important thing. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, if you go to a party, some of the people in the party should be the sitters and should be watching other people. You
Yeah.
know, if everybody's stoned out of their mind, that's a recipe for disaster. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know.
The other thing that I kind of wanted to not warn about, but mention is this idea of chasing the high, of chasing that first experience, right? Because your first experience with things is often not your best, but it's that unique experience of you're at that music festival and the lights and the people, and you drop a little bit of acid. It's the coolest experience. And then the next time you want that same experience, you're never going to get that same experience. And there are people that get into a habit of chasing that high. I had a client share with me that she had taken GHB, which is the date rape drug, but it's also a recreational drug. People take that. I know several people that take that for themselves. It makes you feel drunk without having to consume the alcohol, without the hangover. It gets you giddy. You don't take much, a couple drops, and you're fine. This gal, knowing that you are not to mix that with alcohol, because that's really incredibly dangerous, she had taken something else, and then she had her GHB, and somebody offered her a drink, and she went, okay, because she was chasing that high. And she ended up seizing and going to the ER. And she's like, I still so regret that, because I know that I shouldn't have done that. But because she was altered, she wasn't thinking clearly and kept chasing it.
Yeah.
This is how it gets dangerous. And this is how people end up dead in a coma, seizing in a hotel room at the ER in the middle of the night. Or God, I thank God her friend was there.
Mhm.
You know, who knows what would have happened to her seizing in a hotel room on the floor. I mean, that might have been her end, which would be incredibly sad. So just, you know, ask questions and know what you're getting into. And if you want to do this from a therapeutic basis, find a good clinic and good coaches that are ready to help you with it.
Exactly. Yep.
Harm reduction. That's the last thing I'll say.
Yep.
All right. That was lovely. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygruver.coach.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out and have a great week. Be safe. And we will see you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.
See ya.